I just went to public, like Woonsocket High School all the way through. And then when I graduated from there, I knew, I was pretty sure I wanted to be a writer, and I had all, I wanted to go to Oberlin or, some, like I would just collect all these catalogs. And I remember the guidance counselor, it's horrible, was like, oh, those are really expensive. Why don't you just go to the state school? So I went to University of Rhode Island, which was, now it has a fabulous creative writing program, but at the time it had no creative writing at all. So I spent a very unhappy year, not unhappy, but just, it wasn't, wasn't my thing really. And then I didn't realize that you could be a poet who was alive. I just had read only Emily Dickinson and Robert Frost, and I think maybe Walt Whitman, all of whom were dead. So I was like, oh, no one writes poetry anymore. Just the way people don't make their own shoes, or, it's just, it's like, we don't do it. But then I remember just being in Narragansett, where University of Rhode Island is, and finding in a bookstore a book by Kathleen Spivak called The Jane Poems. And they were all little poems about a woman called Jane. I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm doing. Like, not well, but that's like what I want to do. And I'm doing this in my notebook, but I didn't know that you could have poems that didn't rhyme, the whole bit. So I talked to a professor there, and he was like, you should probably, which I think is so great that he said this, you should probably apply to Emerson. They have creative writing. And I did. So then my undergrad, I just went to Emerson, which was fabulous. It was so good for creative writing. There I met Tom Lux, and he said, you should go for an MFA, which of course I had no idea what an MFA was. And then that's how I wound up at Sarah Lawrence for grad school. My mom and dad were very working class and just kind of didn't get, like, what is she, why is she going to school for writing? She could just write in her room, or, it just didn't make any sense to them at all. And they met Jean Valentine, who was my professor. And I remember my mom said, well, what is she going to do in the real world? And Jean said, oh, she's very much in the real world. And somehow my mom just went, oh, okay. Like, my mom, I guess she and Jean were the same age. Here was Jean, like, doing a very different kind of life than my mom. And my mom just, I don't know, listened to her. So, I mean, that I thought was so wonderful. And also that Jean would think writing is, in the real world. And it is, of course, but, she was just able to say it with such authority. And then Tom Lux, who was also a professor of mine, I just remember, like, having a poem with the word complain, and he, like, crossed it out and was like, gripe, don't you hear that? Gripe is so much better than complaining. And he was really about sound. And that always sticks with me, even though I want to say something accurately, if it's like multisyllabic or like weighed down, I just hear it in my head all the time. Like, don't be lazy, chop, like, get it right. So those were my two, I think, big lessons, I would say.